Hello, my name is Dr. Mike Eves. I am the debate coach here at Valdosta State University. Initially, we wish to thank the telecommunication faculty and students for giving us the opportunity today to present a demonstration debate to the audience. In addition, we would like to thank the support of the Communication Arts Department, the College of the Arts, and Student Government Association for their continual support of the VSU debate team. Currently, we have 9 members on the debate team. They are Michelle Bachman, John Beasley, Nikki Dubois, Travis Dular, Carmen Heitzer, George Horton, Hank Smith, Heather Smith, and Larry Woods. Today, George Horton and Larry Woods will debate against each other. In this debate today, we will give the audience a brief look into the world of intercollegiate debate competition. The debaters will be addressing the following topic: resolved that the United States should substantially change its foreign policy towards Mexico. Affirming the resolution this afternoon is George Horton. George, a freshman political science major from Triumph, Georgia, will be arguing that the United States should change its foreign policy with Mexico. Specifically, George will advocate that we need to change how the United States and Mexico go about dealing with the war on drugs. Negating the resolution is Larry Woods. Larry, a senior public relations major from Brooksville, Florida, will be arguing that the United States should not change its foreign policy towards Mexico. Larry will contend in his speeches that the war on drugs is a sound policy and that current efforts to reduce drugs in Mexico and across the border have been successful. Now we will start the debate. George Horton will give the first speech defending the resolution.
Each day, someone dies from the use of narcotics within the United States. It is this senseless death that has led to the commitment to combat the spread of illicit substances. However, we have also persuaded the country of Mexico to enter this war on drugs. Mexico agreed to attempt to help and began implementing programs modeled after those of the United States. However, these programs can now be identified as inappropriate and ineffective. It is for this reason that I stand resolved that the United States should substantially change its foreign policy towards Mexico. Turn with me now to contention 1. The current Mexican anti-drug focus is misdirected. Subpoint A. The current programs are not working. Toro in 95. Originally designed to impose order along the U.S.-Mexico border, the programs gradually converted to interdiction. The policies have largely been unsuccessful in addressing the issues. 2. The status quo not only doesn't solve the problem, but makes it worse. Toro in 95. In sum, current policies need to be altered because their implementation is exacerbating the problems that justified fighting drug production and trafficking in the first place. B. The current policy is more harmful than beneficial. 1. The current policy facilitates corruption and violence. Toro in 95. Violence and corruption are inevitable consequences of current policies rather than the cause of their failure. 2. Mexico's policies often violate human rights. Toro in 95. There is renewed and rising concern in Mexico and abroad over the violation of human rights related to the enforcement of anti-drug laws. It is for this reason I propose the following plan. Plank 1. The United States will use its influence in Mexico's anti-drug policies to encourage the following changes in Mexico's programs. A. The number of soldiers and police personnel shall be reduced, eventually to be replaced with small, better trained anti-narcotics units. B. Replace eradication and interdiction programs with programs oriented in preventing the forming of trafficking groups. C. All anti-drug policies will be delinked from public health to focus on decreasing violence and the negative effects of current anti-drug laws. D. The plan will be phased in incrementally. Plank 2. Funding will be through normal means, including but not limited to the reallocation of funds spent enforcing Mexico's current laws. Plank 3, enforcement will be served under normal constitutional means. Plank 4, the ensuing affirmative speeches will serve as intent. The effectiveness of the plan is noted in contention 2. A change in Mexico's anti-drug campaign will solve. A. The United States is the largest determiner of Mexico's anti-drug campaign, allowing us to exert influence on policy choices. Toro in 95. It is ironic that Mexico's current anti-drug policy is largely determined by U.S. anti-drug policy. B. The anti-drug campaign in Mexico should not focus on public health. Toro again states in 95. An important change in the new strategy would be to stop thinking about Mexican anti-drug policy as an instrument of public health. C. The smuggling of drugs should be Mexico's main focus. Toro again states in 1995. In the global market for illicit drugs, each country plays a role relevant to its resources, political structure, and domestic demand. Drug trafficking in Mexico is centered first and foremost around smuggling. D. The affirmative plan is exactly what is needed. Toro in 95. In any event, the short-term effects of drastic reduction in anti-drug law enforcement are not easy to anticipate, but the Mexican government could try a gradual decrease and reorientation of its drug law enforcement budget. A change in strategy toward less but more focused enforcement may prove beneficial in many ways. Reducing the number of police and soldiers involved in anti-drug law enforcement, focusing instead on the use of small and better trained anti-narcotics units, would positively affect the performance and enforcement agencies by reducing their exposure to bribery and limiting the chance of violent encounters. Eradication and interdiction programs would gradually be replaced by programs oriented to prevent the creation of groups of traffickers and impose their own version of law and order, especially in the countryside. In addition, enforcement would be geared towards setting limits to traffickers' behavior vis-a-vis government and society. Redirecting the anti-drug law enforcement apparatus in this way could yield better results in terms of Mexico's main policy objectives without necessarily augmenting the drug production and contraband significantly. Case underview. I further note that all procedurals and jurisdictionals, including topicality, counterplan, and voting issues, should be presented in the first negative speech. B. I further note that I have the right to clarify intent should the negative team misinterpret what the affirmative plan is designed to do. I now encourage you to vote affirmative. I stand ready for cross-examination.
My first question is, what impact does this case have on the world?
Worldwide?
Worldwide.
Sets a precedent would be the main thing. Mexico would no longer be unhappy with us because we're forcing them to do things that are hurting themselves. It could also help the North-South gap, which is basically saying it'll help the industrial world's relations with the third world poor country relations also.
Okay.
So it could have eminently numerous impacts.
Okay. I heard a part of your plan that said that you could redirect funds to receive funding. How is this possible?
Reallocation of the current funding we're spending, as in the U.S. government is spending, to enforce Mexico's laws.
Okay, so the United States is paying for this plan.
We're already paying to enforce Mexico's laws. When those laws change, we would therefore be paying for the implementation of plan.
So are we fiating this plan? Are we forcing Mexico to do this plan?
No, Mexico always follows our policy influence as stated in its solvency.
Okay, that one small card that said that Mexico will follow, but it doesn't say exactly what Mexico will follow?
Again, this card is from Toro, where she is specifically talking about anti-drug policy.
Okay, who is Toro?
Toro is Maria Cecilia Toro. She wrote the book Mexico's War on Drugs. She is professor at the study of international college in Mexico.
Okay. What is keeping us from doing this plan now?
What is keeping us from doing
Right.
it? We're not doing it.
We're just not doing it. Okay.
That's all that needs to be going on.
Okay.
If we're not doing it, then it's not happening.
Will all of Mexico and all of the United States be affected by this plan? And if so, how?
All of Mexico will, since we're influencing the change on their policy. We're not changing our own anti-drug efforts, but only that of Mexico.
Okay, so the Zapatistas and the rebel movements in the southern portion of Mexico will be affected?
Yes, but it's not directed at those groups. It's directed at the drug smuggling.
Thank you. Copy of the case, please.
Read that card where it says read card.
At this point, the negative team is preparing their case against the war on drugs. Larry's going to be arguing several positions in his speech. He's probably going to explore several areas, one of which dealing with inherency and the fact that the current system can implement this plan. He's taking prep time at this point. Each team in the debate is allowed 5 minutes for preparation, and he is gathering materials for quotations and analyzing what George just presented to rebut and to advance positions of his own in negating this resolution. Currently, he's down to 4 minutes left. And in debate, it's very important that the debaters use their time wisely. Since there's more than one speech for each debater, they have to use this time conservatively. And so Larry would probably not want to use all his time for this speech. He is now ready for his speech.
Okay, let me signpost as to where I'm headed. I'm going to go first to a brief overview, then I'm going to go to a counterplan, and then to a dissad that I have nicknamed Black Monday. I will handle inherency and all case attacks in my second speech. Okay. Starting off with the overview, I would like to note that the affirmative team said that all procedurals and voting issues had to be handled in the first negative constructive, but there are two constructive speeches so that we can have voting issues in both constructives. So I would like to vote this down and say that if I find a voting issue in my case attacks, I should be allowed to bring that up in my second negative constructive speech. Moving on to the OAS counterplan, which is the Organization of American States. Observation 1, mandates. Canada will enter into an active cooperative relationship with the Organization of American States. The OAS will then implement the affirmative proposal. The mandates will be issued as an OAS directive to which all member states will be obliged to comply. Funding and enforcement will be through normal means. Negative speeches will clarify intent. Observation 2, non-topicality. A, we violate the United States. We're the OAS, not the United States. B, topical counterplans are legitimate. The affirmative selects their ground when they write the plan. That leaves all other ground as legitimate negative ground. Also, competition checks any potential abuse. Observation 3, competition. A, net benefits. The counterplan alone is superior to the combination of plan and counterplan for two reasons. 1, we avoid disadvantages. The disadvantage links are specific to the United States action. Combining unilateral U.S. action with OAS action increases the risk of any of the disadvantages. 2, combinations cripple solvency. The OAS can solve as long as it acts alone. Unilateral U.S. action in any given area completely cripples any OAS operation. B, permutation standards. Competition asks whether the plan and the counterplan should coexist. To test that question, all permutations must be written out. That was 1. 2, whole plan inclusive. The permutation should not be allowed to abandon any part of the plan. An affirmative ballot enacts the entire plan, which means a permutation that excludes part of the plan produces a misleading conclusion about competition. Observation 3, solvency. I will now read a card from Peter McKenna, Center for the Foreign Policy Analysis, 1993. The role of mediator could also be carried over to relations between Latin America and the USA. While it is possible that Washington may wish to avail itself of Canada's intermediary skills, it is also likely that Canada will be working to influence the U.S. government. But if the Canadian government wants to become a force within the OAS, it will doubtlessly have to use its competence in bridge building to find some middle ground between Washington's view and Latin America's position on various issues. In addition to closing the U.S.-Latin American divide, it could also have a useful moderating influence on Washington, particularly when it works in concert with other like-minded countries within the OAS, such as Brazil, Mexico, Venezuela, and Argentina. Canada could be able to constrain or limit U.S. actions or perhaps even influence the policy-making process in Washington. What I'm saying here is that unilateral action will not work. Multilateral action is best, and that Mexico will see U.S. action alone as a way of the United States wanting to take over everything that Mexico does in their way of enforcing laws. Now I go to a Black Monday disadvantage, which says that Mexico wants to do things on their own first, and otherwise they will misinterpret U.S. actions. A. U.S.-Mexico relations are improving now. This is from the Bilateral Commission on the Future of the United States and Mexican Relations, 1989. It is further our conviction that the areas for bilateral cooperation are expanding steadily as the two nations become linked more intimately. This is so whether one considers the consequences of the technological and scientific revolution of our age, the monumental needs of education in the two countries, the control of illicit substances or environmental measures. By the same token, the levels of government and the number of agencies within each level that will find themselves treating issues effectively both nations is constantly increasing. B. The affirmative's unilateral action by the U.S. jeopardizes relations with Mexico. This is from Robert Pastor, professor at El Colegio de Mexico, 1988. Second, there is no country in the world which is more sensitive to U.S. efforts and influence than Mexico. And no country is successful in resisting American influences. If the U.S. is too direct or heavy-handed, it is likely to invoke the opposite of what it wants. If the United States is subtle and indirect, Mexico is likely nonetheless to misinterpret U.S. motives and erect a wall around a decision to keep out U.S. influence. What I'm trying to say here is that the United States acting alone will harm Mexico more than it will do good. I've offered two disadvantages as to why you should vote for the negative team, simply because we can do a counterplan with more than one nation where Mexico will not feel invaded, and two, the Black Monday dissent, which says that if U.S. acts alone, that Mexico will feel invaded. Thank you. Please vote negative. I now stand ready for cross-ex.
Your contention is that Canada and the OAS can solve the anti-drug smuggling or the anti-drug policy problem, correct?
That's right.
By implementing the affirmative plan, correct?
By implementing the negative counterplan.
What is the negative counterplan?
The negative counterplan is through the OAS and through normal means. We will not redirect any current funds.
What is your plan? What are you going to do to solve the problem?
We are going to create the same type of branch that you will, only it will be through the OAS.
So it's basically the USA would have to exert influence once again, since that is a part of our plan, correct?
But no, they would not be whole plan inclusive. What I'm saying with that statement is that the United States is not all of the OAS, only a part.
So the negative team's counterplan doesn't have to be whole plan inclusive, but the affirmative team, if it permutes or adds on to case, has to be whole plan conclusive?
That's correct, since you set the ground rules, and then I can set mine up through the parametrics of the debate after you.
So you're claiming you have
1AC.
right of parametrics?
No, you had that right in the 1AC, you used it, and then I'm following the rules from then on.
So my rules stand in the round. They shouldn't be contended.
They should be.
They should be contended?
That's why I offered a counterplan.
Okay. On the Black Monday. Now this is saying that unilateral action will spur somewhat of a revolt type thing in Mexico, correct?
Right.
Okay, why has this not happened with our current influence on their drug policies?
Okay. First of all, is that they are successfully smuggling and they are corrupt at this point.
Who is
Otherwise,
they?
the Mexican government.
The Mexican government, you have proof of this?
Well, I can offer some analysis in
You
my
don't
next
have
speech.
any actual evidence saying that the Mexican government is corrupt, that the Mexican government are the ones smuggling the drugs?
Well, if they weren't corrupt, then their presidential candidate from 1994, Casillo, would not be dead at this point.
Can I have your copy of your counterplan?
Yeah.
At this point, the affirmative team will be preparing for the second speech. George is going to try to attack against Larry's positions. If you remember, most of the speech, Larry focused on several issues. Primarily, he focused on a counter plan or a counter proposal to what the affirmative team has advocated. Recall the resolution that I stated early. We're dealing with United States change toward Mexico, and what Larry is suggesting is that instead of the United States doing this alone, we would do this through the Organization of American States, which you may remember in his speech was referred to as OAS. And basically, George is going to have to respond to this counter proposal, suggesting that maybe it would lead to harms or hurt the United States in some way, and he will also probably defend his original plan that the United States should do this alone with Mexico. And there were some other issues that Larry presented. George has used 1 minute of preparation. Also, it's very important to realize when you're looking at a debate round that debaters can't make new arguments in rebuttal, so this is his final chance.
I'm going overview, then to his disadvantage, Black Monday, and then to the OAS counterplan. His initial point when he came up here was to say that we cannot set the ground rules of the round. He is wrong on that statement. The affirmative sets the ground rules of the round. He tries to de-justify our underview that he must present all jurisdictionals in the first negative speech by saying that the second speech is also constructive. This does not justify new arguments there. What you must look at is that when the affirmative sets such ground rules or paradigms, they limit the negative team from abusive actions, from one tactic called spreading the affirmative out of the round. You must uphold this stricture in order to prevent abusive actions by the negative team. Now we shall go on to Black Monday. My one on that is that it's non-unique. The link is so generic that any U.S. action towards Mexico should have caused. Moreover, what prevents it from happening in the status quo or the current policies? 2, no link. There is no reason why our case specifically causes the disadvantage. What is the specific link story behind it? 3, no link. Why would plan assume the scenario depicted in the disadvantage? 4, no specific link. What is the specific reason our case causes the disadvantage? How does it perpetuate the escalation of the scenario? Case assumes specific course of action. What does this action do to cause the disadvantage? 5, no brink. Any action the U.S. government takes towards Mexico that involves specific involvement would cause this DA. Next, no time frame. How long after the plan is enacted would it take for the plans to incur? Next, no propensity. There is no propensity for the impacts to occur. The analysis behind the scenario gives no clear foundation as to why they would occur. Now, I also would like to point out that by enacting the affirmative plan, what we're actually doing is enacting a plan proposed by the Mexican government. Look at Toro, a specialist from the college within Mexico, from the Centro de Estudios Internacionales of El Colegio de Mexico. This is from Mexico. This plan was designed by the Mexican people. This plan is exactly what they want. Therefore, all we're saying to them is, sure, go ahead and do your own thing. This actually improves our relations. Thus, any impact he garners from bad relations with Mexico becomes to the affirmative side because we actually improve relations with Mexico. We make them stronger, better, and thus we get the impacts of the disadvantage. So you can add them on as an extra advantage to case. We now have the DA impacts. Now, on to counterplan. My first argument here is the OAS does not have the influence necessary to precipitate the changes within Mexico's policy. What you look at here is case. You see specific cards stating that we do have the influence in Mexico, that we can change their policy. Only the United States has this influence. If you'll look at the if you'll look at the link to this disadvantage, it states that we have a unique place within Mexico's political system. This shows that we are the only country that has any possible chance of influencing Mexico at all. Until he can present you specific evidence on anti-drug issues, then he has no weight in the round. 2, I would like to implement a permutation to this counterplan. I will add a cooperative plan with the OAS in the implementation of our plan. We will cooperate with them. This would be added on as another plank to our plan. What you're seeing is that we can cooperate with the OAS and go through them if we have to. We just go exert our own influence under the name of the OAS. Simple. Very simple. There's no reason we can't do that. Now, going to counterplan proper or specific counterplan parts, we're going to go to his observation 3, competition. Number 2, combinations cripple solvency. If that's true, then this counterplan can't work. It's combined with Canada. They have no solvency. The only plan around that has solvency is the affirmative case. What you look at now is that there are absolutely no attacks on the affirmative case. None at all. They tried to present you a counterplan which can't solve unless our plan goes into effect with it, which we do through permutation, and a DA, which is actually an advantage for the affirmative case. This leaves you with only one way to vote in this round, affirmative. I now stand ready for cross-examination. Wait a minute.
My first question is, if the counterplan won't work, then why are you trying to enact it as part of your plan?
As I stated, the counterplan will not work by itself, but if we enact my permutation, which combines it with our plan, it will work. It won't work by itself, it will work with our plan. If it's such a big impact that we must have the OAS involved supposedly, then we'll involve the OAS within the affirmative plan.
Okay. Then on your, you said that it cripples solvency, but that card reads that unilateral action cripples
Are you
solvency.
talking about my competition argument?
Right.
Unfortunately, the competition argument, which is argued there, says that any combination cripples solvency. This is inherently false because you yourself use Canada in combination with the OAS. This proves that argument false.
Okay. Are you not aware that Canada can work with the OAS according to Warren Christopher and other members of the United States government?
What would be the point? According to that card, they cannot work together.
Okay, unfortunately, I did not read that card in the round.
Well, unfortunately, you did read the combinations cripple solvency.
Right.
That's the point.
Okay, but the competition is directly with the United States and not Canada, as the card states.
If you can adequately argue that, then you can hold that argument to be true. Until you can do so, it's false.
Case.
Okay, at this point, Larry's going to prepare his next negative speech, and he only has 4 minutes of prep time remaining, so Again, as I mentioned before, the debaters have to use their prep time wisely. He's going to have to respond to the allegations and arguments advanced by the last affirmative speaker, recall primarily attacks on the Black Monday disadvantage and the counterplan. So he, as a debater, is going to have to try to reestablish his negative case. At this point, he would want to show that his counterproposal is more beneficial than the affirmative proposal. And he does want to reassert the value of his Black Monday disadvantage by showing that that's a true problem to the affirmative plan. The negative team is down to 3 minutes prep time remaining.
Okay, to give a little signpost as to where I'm headed, I'm going to go first to inherency, then I'm going to go to the counterplan, Black Monday, and case. Okay, first of all, inherency. Cross-apply my cross-ex question after his first speech when I asked what was keeping him from doing the plan now, and he basically said nothing. Therefore, he violates inherency. A, prima facie burden. The affirmative team must show inherency in the case. Without inherency in the case, the affirmative team has failed to meet its prima facie burden. According to Austin Freely in its text, Argumentation and Debate 1993 says that the affirmative must prove that the essential elements of the case are inherent. There are two types of inherency. We ask you as the judge to conduct an inherent test to see if the affirmative team has met its obligations. 1, structural or laws which serve as a barrier, or 2, attitudes or public opinions which prevent the affirmative plan from being implemented. C, the Mexico topic burden. If the affirmative team fails to provide either the laws which suggest the affirmative foreign policy cannot be implemented in the status quo, or public attitudes which serve as a barrier to change foreign policy, then the affirmative should lose the debate. D, inherency is a voting issue. Since inherency is a prima facie burden, must be illustrated in a policy resolution, and the affirmative team fails to provide inherency. Therefore, we ask that you vote for the negative in light of this. Also, I would like to respond on the overview. According to this, since we both have two constructives, and he implemented new material in his second constructive, I ask that you allow this to be implemented in my second constructive. Moving on to the counterplan. My one under the cripple solvency argument is that I did not read the card that he is addressed to. My second argument under this is that Canada is the issue here. And he has no evidence at all that says Canada will cripple OAS action. All we are saying is that unilateral U.S. action will harm. Also, on the permutation standards, I'd like to respond to that by saying, first, that they cannot co-op with the OAS because then he is non-topical. I asked, that was one of the perm standards, that he must keep his whole entire plan. Now he is trying to add the negative plan. Therefore, we have two affirmative teams in the round now that he has tried to add my plan. Also, he says that he's going to go in through the OAS. He can't. To resolve the resolution, he must go in through the United States only and not through the OAS. Moving on to Black Monday, my response to what he said is, under the no link, no brink, no impact, my first on his non-uniqueness is that it doesn't matter if it's non-unique. The cards state that Mexico does not want the U.S. to override all of its judgments. And also under the no brink is that as soon as the ballot is signed affirmative, this will happen. And the 3, under the no link scenario, is that the link is that the United States wants to go in and do this plan simply because it will help the United States. Now, specifically going to case, First of all, I would like to talk about that contention 2 A card that says that the U.S. is a large determiner of Mexico's anti-drug campaign, but it does not say that the United States determines all of Mexico's policies and that Mexico will follow everything the United States does. It just says it's a large determiner. Also, under his D card, where the AF plan is exactly what is needed, I would like to refute what he said by saying that Toro said the people wanted this. All this evidence is from one source. The people of Mexico, there are millions and millions, not just one source. He is only speaking for one source, Mario Toro. Thank you. Please vote negative. I now stand ready for cross-ex.
On your inherency thing, you connected an overview to this. You said that I read new material in my last speech. Could you please direct me to the new material that I read?
You talked about new material.
I didn't talk about your material. Wasn't that all that I talked about was your material?
You talked some about your case as well.
Which was the material presented in the first speech alone, correct?
Right, but you did
Thus, I didn't read any new material.
But you
correct?
did make new arguments.
How is that? How do you design that as new arguments? What is an old argument then? Are you contending that now the debate is over?
No, that's what you're contending. When you said that I could only have voting issues in the 1NC, there's no reason to debate after the first 2 speeches if you will not allow me to introduce new material into my second negative constructive speech.
So you're arguing only the first part of subpoint A, the jurisdictionals.
Right.
Okay. Now, on to the counterplan. Are you trying to run a topicality violation under this competition?
I'm just saying I could. What I'm saying is that you did not meet the permutation
standards. Could you
standards.
show me that permutation standard that says we must be topical?
Okay. It is not in the plan. It is
It's not
simply
there?
implied through debate
It's
rules.
not there, so it's not in the round.
Okay. If it is there, I cannot find it at this time since it is not in front of me.
Okay. Can I have a copy of your counterplan again?
You have it. I think here it is.
This concludes the constructive speeches, and now we'll be going into rebuttals. The affirmative will have 2 rebuttals. The negative will have 1 rebuttal. This is going to be the first affirmative rebuttal speech. Realize what I said before. In these speeches, the debaters cannot make new arguments, and they're going to have to base their claims and analysis on prior speeches in the debate. At this point, George is going to want to reestablish his plan, counter the evidence and analysis read by the negative speaker on the OAS counterplan position, which suggests that our policy should be done through Canada, through the Organization of American States, and not unilateral United States action, and also defending against the disadvantages raised by the negative team. The affirmative is down to 3 minutes of preparation time. One of the things that you may have noticed at this point, the debaters write down the arguments as the opponent speaks. This is called a flow. And it's very important that in debate you take a very close flow, meticulous notes of what the other person says. You don't guess at what they say. You try to hopefully write down the transcript of the debate round. Also, you notice we've had 2 cross-examination periods, and those periods can be used in your speeches to help your case.
Going overview, inherency, counterplan, Black Monday. Very simply, on the overview, what he's neglecting to answer is the B subpoint of my underview, which he is trying to argue. It says that we may clarify any point of case at any point in the round. Thus, I'm now going to clarify our jurisdictionals in the round argument. He does not understand that what this argument is saying is that the basis for all argumentation in the round must be set within the first two speeches. He neglects to do this when he reads the new inherency argument in the second negative. What this does is violates the affirmative rights in the round. This equals an abusive action by the negative team, which must immediately equal affirmative ballot. When you observe this, I set the basis for the round for my arguments with the affirmative case. All my arguments stem from the affirmative case, except those that stem from that which he read at the beginning, which was his counterplan overview argument and Black Monday. He must conform to those original arguments and only argue on those arguments within the round, or he is in violation of the parametrics or rules set up by the affirmative in the first speech. When he violates these rules, he loses the round. Now, on to the inherency argument. While I feel that it's abusive that I have to argue this, I just want to make one real big point. He's left out one form of inherency here. Existential. There are 3 forms of inherency, not 2, 3. He should know this. He's been to debate camp. He should know this. If he doesn't, it's his fault. There's structural, like he stated. There's attitudinal, like he stated. And there's also existential, which means that if it doesn't exist, you have inherency. I would also like to cross-apply my contention 1, inherency. Big argument there. A whole contention composed of 3 cards, three specific instances that give us inherency. Now, we're going on to counterplan. Okay, his main argument here is that we can't permute because we violate topicality. My one off that is that, why? Why can't we violate topicality? There is no permutation standard in his counterplan that says it anywhere. I've got a copy of it right here. If he can find it, which he says he couldn't a while ago, if he can find it, then we'll let him have it. But he doesn't have it. Now, I also want to point out that topicality is not a voting issue anyway because A, it decreases clash, B, it strays the focus of debate to tangential issues, C, it's a time-suck argument, D, it limits the education of the debate by forcing us to examine words we all understand anyway. Thus, you see, the topicality is not a good permutation standard. I met all these other permutation standards by presenting it in written form and so on and so forth. Thus, we can act through the OAS. We can do it. We are a part of the OAS, and like he is neglecting to tell you, the United States is a part of the OAS. Thus, we can call it an OAS action. Now, on to Black Monday. Very simply, he dropped the link term. It's an affirmative advantage. We solve for U.S.-Mexico relations. We're implementing a plan that is supported by the Mexican government in the first place. We're telling them to go ahead, do what you want. We're removing the coercion that says you must do what we tell you to. We're telling them, you do what you want. When you refer to the plan, you'll see that we're merely encouraging them to do the plan we suggest. They can do what they want. What you see is that we win the round on Black Monday alone. It's a completely separate solvency issue. The only way to vote in the round is affirmative. Thank you.
That concludes the first affirmative rebuttal, and the negative team has 3 minutes and counting prep time remaining. This will be Larry's final speech, so he will have to convince the judges and audience members today that his position is superior to the affirmative. This is his last chance that he has. Typically, in the last negative rebuttal, the debater wants to create a larger picture and try to argue that the negative position is superior to the affirmative.
Okay, I'd like to give a little signpost as to where I am headed. I'm going first to overview, then to the inherency, counterplan, and Black Monday. And I'm also going to address case. So, going straight to the overview, first of all, on the jurisdictionals, they do not set up 2 negative constructive speeches so that we can use the first one to implement all our arguments and then the second one just to twiddle our thumbs. No, we use the second one to make new arguments and to look at flaws that we may have missed in the first negative constructive. So then that will lead me straight into inherency. First of all, I'd like to remind you it's a voting issue. Second of all, according to Austin Freely, existential inherency does not exist. Third of all, I would like to note that if there is no barrier, no real threat to keeping his plan from being done, then the plan should have already been done. Fourth, he says that, we have these 3 inherency cards, but none of them say that people in Mexico do not want this new campaign, and none of these cards say that the United States is so far in debt that they can't afford to do this plan right now. So he does not have case-specific inherency cards. Okay, moving on to the counterplan, I would first like to note on this perm that all perm standards had to be written out. He did not submit to me a handwritten perm standard, and I see him now waving it around, but he did not submit that to me in time for it to meet the permutation standards. Second of all, on the T not a voter, I did not make it a voting issue. I just said that he was going outside the resolution to try to address this. Third of all, he mentioned that the OAS was crippling, that he took out the OAS solvency. Well, if he took out the OAS solvency, then we have just turned him because he is taking the OAS as the agent of action for his plan. Therefore, he has no solvency to the OAS or his plan. Therefore, my Black Monday disad will outweigh anything that he has here. Moving on to Black Monday, what I'd like to note, he said on the link turn, he said there was a big link turn. Well, first of all, he had no evidence. This was merely analysis. Second of all, he did not make this a voting issue. Third of all, he has no evidence that says that is unique to his advantage over Black Monday. He tries to claim Black Monday as an advantage, then he tries to turn this advantage. What he is doing is double turning himself to make this a negative advantage. So as I see it in the round, you have 3 different reasons to vote for the negative. You can vote on inherency because he has no reason that he cannot do this plan now. You can, second of all, vote on the counterplan since he did not meet the permutation standards. And third of all, you can vote on Black Monday since Mexico looks at U.S. actions as sneaky, and possibly the fact that the United States wants to sneak something by Mexico. Thank you. Please vote negative.
At this point, George is ready for his final speech.
Going to overview, inherency, counterplan, Black Monday. First of all, on the overview, I think it's pretty much useless arguing this now since I'm going to argue inherency anyway, so fine, he can read new arguments in the second constructive. Big deal. Now, inherency. He first of all says inherency is a voter. Again, big deal. Who cares? We're winning it. He says that we don't have a barrier. The current laws are the barrier. We have our own current policy. It exists now. My plan does not exist in the status quo. Now, what I also want to point out is he says that existential doesn't exist because Austin Freely said it didn't. First of all, he wasn't reading from the card when he read that part. Austin Freely did clarify what inherency was. Austin Freely merely stated it was a voting issue. Again, his analysis was there's only existing structural and attitudinal. He should have known that there's also existential. We are winning inherency. He said, now, once again, I want you to go to contention 1 and look closely. It states 3 cards stating that this plan is not being done, that it's not being done because there's current policies already there. It's stated specifically, clearly, and cut so clean that you can see it any way you look at it. The negative team just wants to waste our time with this argument. The affirmative team is winning it clearly. Now, on the counterplan. He comes up here and tries to make a very pitiful argument that is not written, the permutation is not written out. I didn't give it to him because he didn't ask for it. It was here the whole time, written out. If he'd asked, he would have had it. We win on counterplan. He drops all the other args on counterplan and goes to the permutation. We win. We're going through the OAS. We can do that because his own evidence says we can. Black Monday, he gets up here and tries to say we double turn and all this mess. No. We solve for U.S.-Mexico relations by letting them do their own plans. We're only encouraging them to do our plan. They do what they want to. And by giving them this freedom, we increase our relations. Thus, we get it as an advantage. We win the round there. Thank you.
That concludes our debate for today. We appreciate it. Thank you.